The wind cut straight through my jacket the second the car door slammed behind me. My mom's face was lit by the dashboard glow, cold, rigid, burning with that familiar anger. "Walk home, Nova. Maybe the cold will teach you respect." Then the tires spit gravel, and she was gone, leaving me on a deserted rural road at 17, in the dead of winter. I'm Nova Hale, and my family always sold the perfect household fantasy: matching Christmas pajamas, curated Instagram smiles, a mother who everyone called an angel. But angels don't abandon their daughters miles from home because they talked back. My lips were already numb. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold onto any warmth left. My breaths came out in trembling bursts. My phone battery had died minutes before she kicked me out. No streetlights. No houses. Just endless black stretching on both sides. All I had done was quietly ask, "Mom, why did you hit me?" Her answer was violence followed by punishment. Halfway down the frozen shoulder, my knees buckled. I forced myself up, vision spinning. Then, from behind me, headlights slowed and stopped. A door creaked open. For a second, I was sure it was my mother coming back. Maybe guilt finally caught up to her. But guilt had never lived inside that woman. The car that stopped behind me was older, humming unevenly, and when the door opened, a familiar voice cut through the frozen air. "Nova? Sweetheart." My knees almost buckled again. It was Grandma May, the only soft place in my entire life, the only person who ever looked at me without expecting perfection. She wrapped her coat around my shoulders before I could speak. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from fear. "What did she do this time?" she whispered, as if she already knew the answer. Because everyone knew. Everyone except the people who praised my mother like some golden-hearted saint. On the way to her house, I stared out the window, fighting the burn behind my eyes. Grandma didn't press, didn't lecture, didn't pretend we were a happy family. She drove with one hand gripping the wheel, the other holding mine. And the warmth of her touch only highlighted how frozen my fingers were. Then she glanced at me again, really looked. "Nova, you're turning blue." Her voice cracked. "We need to get you to the hospital. Now." The car sped up, but neither of us knew. Mandatory reporters were waiting there. By the time we reached the ER, the world around me felt muffled, like I was hearing everything from underwater. A nurse rushed over the moment Grandma half-carried me inside. My legs wouldn't cooperate. My fingers were stiff and waxy. "Possible hypothermia," someone called out. They wrapped me in heated blankets, clipped monitors to me, and started rubbing warmth back into my skin. I remember the sting, fire racing under frozen flesh. I remember Grandma's voice breaking as she tried to explain. But the nurse's eyes kept darting to my arms, my ribs, the faint bruises my mother always insisted were discipline marks. Then came the questions. Soft at first, gentle, and then sharper. "Nova, who left you outside? How far did you walk? Has this happened before? Do you feel safe at home?" My throat tightened. I'd spent years learning to protect my mother's image, the golden woman who volunteered, baked for neighbors, smiled at church. The one who punished me in places no one would see. But the ER lights were too bright. The nurses too observant. The truth too loud to hide. When the attending physician stepped out of the room, I saw it. A CPS worker waiting with a clipboard. And next to her, 2 police officers walking in. The officers stood in the doorway like they'd walked into a crime scene, and in a way, they had. One of them, a tall woman with a steady voice, asked Grandma to step aside. The CPS worker pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Nova, we just need the truth," she said. "What happened tonight?" I stared at my hands wrapped in warm towels. My fingers trembled, not from the cold anymore, but from years of swallowed fear finally clawing at my throat. "My mom, she made me get out of the car," I whispered. "She told me to walk home." "How far were you from home?" "I don't know, Miles." "And the bruises?" Her eyes dropped to the fading yellow rings along my ribs. My heart thudded so loudly I heard it over the machines. I felt exposed, like every secret my family polished and displayed had finally cracked open. The officers exchanged a look, that silent, heavy kind professionals make when they've seen this before. Then the CPS worker gently pushed, "Nova, has your mother hit you?" "More than once." Tears spilled before I could stop them. I nodded. That was it. The moment the perfect family illusion shattered. One officer stepped out to radio someone. And minutes later, the radio echoed down the hall. "Go ahead with the arrest." The words "go ahead with the arrest" didn't feel real at first. They echoed down the hallway like they were meant for someone else, some other daughter with a mother cruel enough to abandon her in the freezing dark. But as the officers left to find her, a strange silence settled over me. Not peace. Not relief. Just the slow, dizzy unraveling of 17 years' worth of fear. Grandma sat beside my bed, gripping my hand as if she could hold me together by sheer will. "She can't hurt you tonight," she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about pain anymore. I was thinking about truth. Because while the cops could arrest her for the night, my mother had spent years weaving a flawless reputation. PDA angel, charity host, community sweetheart. She'd smile sweetly at neighbors while grounding me for flinching. She'd post Thanksgiving photos right after making me eat mine alone in the hallway. If she wanted to play perfect, fine. I would let the truth destroy her. Not fists, not screaming, not revenge soaked in teenage fury. I wanted her exposed. Publicly. Irrevocably. My plan began forming right there under hospital blankets. And when the doctor returned with news, my mother was denying everything. Of course she was. "Nova," the CPS worker said softly, "we may need you to give a statement on record." I swallowed hard. Good. It was time the world saw who she really was. They moved me to a private room before taking my statement. Not for comfort, but protection. My mother had already tried calling the hospital twice, demanding to know where I was, insisting this was a misunderstanding. She even told them I'd run away on purpose. Classic. She couldn't help herself. The CPS worker set a recorder on the bedside table. "Nova, start wherever you need." My pulse thudded in my ears. My hands shook. But when I opened my mouth, something inside me clicked. A quiet, steady resolve I didn't know I had. I told them everything. Not in screams. Not in anger. But in calm, measured truth. The kind that slices deeper than fury ever could. I described the slaps, the punishments, the silent treatments that lasted days. The way she'd yank me by the arm hard enough to leave bruises. The manipulation. The humiliation. The abandonment. With every word, the officer's jaws tightened. Grandma cried silently beside me, her palm on my shoulder. When the recorder clicked off, the room felt different. Heavier, charged. "This is enough for a full case," the CPS worker murmured. But I wasn't done. "Can I show you something?" They nodded. I reached for my backpack, the one I'd grabbed before getting kicked out, and pulled out my old phone, cracked but usable. Because on that phone, years of evidence she didn't know I kept. The CPS worker leaned forward as I unlocked the old phone. My fingers hesitated for a moment, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to unleash. Years of recordings, screenshots, and photos sat inside that glitchy device like quiet landmines. I opened the first one. A video clip where my mother was screaming inches from my face, her voice venomous, while I stayed perfectly still. Another, a picture of bruises on my ribs from last summer. Another, texts where she called me ungrateful trash for asking for school supplies. The room went silent. The officer let out a low exhale. This is enough to bury her entire narrative. And that's when everything began unraveling. Fast. The police contacted her again, this time with evidence. She tried charming them, crying, twisting every detail. But the more she spoke, the more frantic she sounded. The mask she'd worn her whole life was slipping. Hard. Neighbors heard the commotion when officers arrived at our apartment. Her voice carried down the hallway, shrill, desperate, defensive. "This isn't me. I'm a good mother. She's lying." But the officers weren't listening anymore. They handcuffed her right there at the door. A woman who curated perfection like a brand, now sobbing in front of everyone. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, the police asked to search the apartment. They searched the apartment for barely 10 minutes before the first officer stepped back outside, his expression darkening. I wasn't there, but Grandma told me later. Neighbors had gathered in the hallway, whispering, watching the woman who preached perfect motherhood as her world cracked open. Inside, the officers found what I already knew existed: belts hidden in drawers, text printouts where she mocked me to relatives, notes about discipline schedules, and a journal detailing the punishments she thought I earned. My mother had documented her cruelty, like it was housekeeping. When the officers presented everything to CPS, the lead worker shook her head. This goes beyond neglect. This is systemic abuse. And just like that, the narrative shifted forever. No more poor misunderstood mother. No more curated persona. Just truth, unfiltered and devastating. She was denied bail pending further investigation. Her friends unfollowed her. Church members stopped defending her. Extended families suddenly remembered every odd thing they'd seen. Her entire empire of lies collapsed under its own weight. But the twist? The one she never saw coming? Grandma filed for emergency guardianship that same night, and CPS approved it within hours. I didn't go into foster care. I didn't get lost in the system. I went home, to her. The only person who ever loved me without conditions. As we left the hospital, snow falling softly around us, Grandma squeezed my hand. "You're safe now, Nova." For the first time in my life, I believed her.